Hi everybody, welcome back. It's Tamitou here, and yes, that was my sim self as a grandma in the intro. So I I gave myself like a grandma hairdo and a grandma outfit and some grandma slippers. Because it's just so freaking adorable, this build, and it was a lot of fun. It was a good excuse to kind of use a lot of pink and frilly items and um play around with like placing a lot of clutter and yeah, just cute stuff like that. So I wanted quite a normal house looking house. And what I mean by that is like the pitched roofs and, you know, a nice front and back garden. But it was also a bit large at this point, so I've sized it down a little bit. I wanted it to be um, quite spacious, but enough or not too big to be hard to furnish. So I wanted it to be full of clutter and to look really busy and full of items, you know, generations and decades of items that have been collected. And yeah, so I just took it down a little bit. And it's actually only a two bedroom, even though it's quite a large house. So yeah, we're just adding a little porch, and I just added some more jutting walls out here and there just to kind of make the interesting or the shape more interesting than just a box. And I think achieving that is something I'm always trying to improve. So I think I'm quite happy with how this turned out. I think the shape isn't too boring. So I don't know. I'm always looking to improve that though. So I kind of went with white windows and doors. Some are older looking, like the large bay windows that I put in now along the bottom are a bit older looking with the shutters, and they're just so cute. I love them, and they bring in lots of light. And then I've used some cats and dogs windows around the top as well that look a little bit newer. Maybe there's been some improvements and renovations done over the years. Maybe a couple of rooms on the exterior added here and there, like the porchways. But other than that, it's just what was necessary to be done. So other than, you know, what was falling apart, nothing else has really been replaced over the years because typically like older people just are happy with how things are. I think it was something about how they were raised. They just had to make do. You know, people from certain generations had to make do with things. And yeah, they're just really happy and satisfied with what they have. I think my generation might have lost that a little bit, and I really, I don't know, I respect that. I think taking care of what you have for as long as you can, just because you don't know when you can get a new one, is quite I don't know, it's quite a good characteristic to have, I think. So I've used that a lot in elements in the rooms and in the house. So you'll see kind of like some carpets are older and more worn, and then some are newer because maybe the grandma always told them like don't go in there unless you have to, like into that room. So the room I'm building now, the downstairs dining space that's going to be, it's going to have its own door, and you'll notice when I put the carpet in that it's a newer carpet, or it's less worn, shall we say. And it's probably like the room that it's like you don't use it unless you have to, like it's not used until guests come over, and maybe the fine china is in there and you can't kind of go in unless you're told, like as a grandchild, I'm saying, like, you know, from their perspective when they come over. So yeah, it's kind of got story elements in it. So I also wanted to put some nautical bits and country living kind of looking items as well, such as these counters. But I didn't want it to be too heavy on those items, just because I wanted you to be able to place it in any world and for it to still look like it fits in, or like it's just a typical grandma's house wherever it might be. So you might notice we are building in Brindleton Bay, and this was mainly just because I liked the lot more than the world itself. But then later on I'd sort of developed a story for that with a couple more items that we placed, so I'll get onto that later. But yeah, I just thought this specific lot was really nice. It was kind of secluded and quiet, and typically, you know, older people like the countryside. They like to be out of the way, have a bit more peace and quiet, away from the noise of the city, let's say. And also, it's a good excuse to bring like the grandchildren over and have them play outdoors and have some fresh air in their lungs, you know. So yeah, I kind of picked this lot because it's secluded. There's lots of trees and there's the sea quite close by, so it's really beautiful. And I think once I add the garden as well, that really gives the outdoorsy vibe of the little pond that I'm going to build, and you know, some flower pots and things like that. So things to do outside where the grandma can go outside and potter around every day, just to kind of have something to do with her time. And this floral wallpaper that you can see in this room, I've added it in quite a few rooms. I don't know if it's overkill or not, but I think that's the point. Oh yeah, I also raised up these shoes because they looked really good on the shelf. Yeah, so the wallpaper, I thought it was perfect for what I needed. It was pink and really feminine and old looking, like old fashioned looking, and I just used it on quite a few walls in a lot of the rooms. But yeah, I tried to keep it quite pastely and soft, but still not just dense pink. Like it's got other colors coming through as well. So it takes me quite a long time to figure out carpets and walls and things like that, just because I wanted it to look messy in that a lot's been done to it over the years. It's not been designed by like an interior designer, but I still wanted it to coordinate a bit and to like match, because usually grandmas like things to match and to look pretty, and they put, doilies over the back of the sofa and things, just to give that extra loved, like the house is loved, that kind of vibe. So yeah, we go with these high back sofa and chair combination from Cats and Dogs, and I do change the swatches in a second. It was just a bit too dark with these kind of dark pink ones. And you'll see me kind of eventually develop the color scheme a little bit more, if you can even call it a color scheme. And I've also put that little side table between the chairs where like the TV guide is going to go, and the remote and the tissues, and like a photo of the grandkids or something, is going to go. And also the TV is more of an afterthought, just kind of stuck on a newer sort of table in the corner where they can see it, and it's clearly not been sort of put as the focal point of the room. It's more of the fireplace with the ornaments and the cats and that kind of thing. I figured this grandma is going to be a bit of a cat crazy lady, but there's nothing wrong with that, because I love cats too. So yeah, once it came to placing a lot of clutter items, I'm trying out new things, like putting these flowers into the urn to make them look like a vase, just to kind of vary the items. I do end up using quite a lot of the same wall items and clutter items, just because I wanted them to look specifically more old-fashioned. So a lot of the base game items are great for that, and things that you wouldn't maybe think of clutter, like the urns. They're not meant to be urns here, they're just meant to be vases and, porcelain things. So yeah, I do end up using a lot of cats as well. That's why I just ended up using a lot of cat things. Basically, they're items that collect dust and require like frequent dusting, because somehow grandmas don't mind about that. They'd rather dust and keep them. So yeah, I first of all went with this more traditional looking rug here. I wanted to add some more green just to sort of balance out the pink on the carpet, but then once I changed the carpet color later on, I give a different rug here that's a little bit newer, but still very floral and grandma-y, I think, in this context. And yeah, I've kind of skipped out the entrance way as well a little bit, but it's kind of just a clutter room. It's got a sideboard with your essentials before you leave the house, maybe some perfume, some old perfumes, and a mirror just to check, that you look presentable, that kind of thing. And some suitcases sort of hidden at the top as well, just clutter items that maybe look like they've just been left there for a long time. And I also figured to raise this mirror up as well from like a centerpiece of the mantelpiece. I really like that, and all it takes is removing the wall and putting it back, so it's not too hard once you've got the move objects on cheat on. So yeah, and moving to the dining room. This is the dining room I was talking about, where the kids aren't allowed in here. It's not for playing. It's got a lot of special items in, and nothing is allowed to be broken here or played with. So here I am messing around with the carpets again. You can see how I've chosen the non-worn swatch, if that makes sense. So they added in City Living, they added a worn swatch of this. I think it's City Living. And I decided to add that on the main part of the house in the living space, just because it would have been used, and it's probably like 50, 60 years old or something, I don't know. Whereas the dining room is being kept a lot more clean and tidy, and yeah, it's not being used as frequently, so that's why it looks a little bit fresher. And yeah, I decided to switch out the more traditional table and chairs I went with first for these newer looking ones, more country looking ones, just because I didn't want it to be too much base game items. I wanted it to look a little bit fresher and a bit more coordinated. So I try out a lot of options along the way, and I've also added a bar in this room as well, just to fill in that gap. And I thought maybe for entertaining other grandma grandma and grandpa friends, you know, having a little tipple or something. So yeah, that's what this room is really for. And the cabinet with all the dishes as well. That's probably like I said, the fine china that they've had for decades. And yeah, it stays here and it's never to be used. You might also notice that around the house there are things that maybe look a little bit 50s or 60s, such as the stove or the cooker. It's got a little bit more of a retro kind of look to it, and it's kind of like a worn colour. Same for the washing machine that I'll put in later in the dryer. And some of the pot plants are a little bit more retro looking because, you know, through the decades they would have collected items. The grandparents or the grandma would have collected items and held on to them. So you can definitely see evidence of, you know, different decades in the house. And it was quite fun to try and incorporate them without making them look too out of place. So yeah, you might notice a few of those items around. And of course, a lot of the inspiration for this house was taken from my own grandparents' house. So things like the porch, the back garden, the wacky carpets, all of these kind of things were taken from their house. So I think a lot of people can relate to that. Things like the open fire as well, that was something that's really iconic in their house. And I also added the little you just saw me add them, like the barbecue tongs, but I added them on the hearth so that they look like the fire tools basically. And also the basket next to the fireplace for the wood or the coal or whatever they might use to burn. And here is where I'm adding the portrait that as I was building, I decided that maybe there was a bit of a story to this portrait. As you can tell, it's like a black and white or old photo of what looks like a sailor and his dog. And I decided maybe this was the grandma's long lost husband, and maybe in his youth he was in the Navy or something like that. And maybe they moved to Brindleton Bay years ago for his job, and when he was older he was lost at sea. So once they'd already started a family and things like that, obviously, maybe he was lost at sea, and since then she's refused to leave this house because this is where they raised their family together and have all these happy memories. And she has that portrait there to look at him every single day so she doesn't forget him. And clearly he's more of a dog person and she's more of a cat person, so they're kind of opposites that attract, really. And I know it's a really sad story, but I just thought it was a really nice element to add, and maybe explains a little bit more why she's living so close to the sea in such a secluded spot, maybe despite her children telling her, you know, you need to move closer to us now because we need to be able to help you out in your old age, and you know, that kind of thing. That grandparents they're stubborn usually and they want to remain independent because why shouldn't they? So yeah, I just wanted to add that kind of story element in. But on the brighter side, there's also a lot of new happy memories being made in this house because upstairs there's two main bedrooms, and one of them is obviously the grandma's bedroom, and the other one has been made into basically a room that the grandkids can come and stay in, and it's full of random toys, and there's two beds for them to stay in, and clearly the grandma's life is now all about her grandkids, and you know, baking cookies when they come over and spoiling them rotten, and saying yes to all the things that their mum and dad say no to. So that's basically what a grandma's role is, right? I mean, second time round she gets to spoil them rotten and yeah, just give them what they want. And I've also put the laundry in here in the downstairs utility with maybe some, as you can see, older ways of doing laundry on the wall. And these washing machines and dry machine are probably so old that originally they were white, you know, that's how discolored they are now. And this very floral kind of garish ironing board as well. So yeah, it's a very pink tiled bathroom, and the bathrooms upstairs are quite similar in that they're all sort of solid colours with I think pink or yellow toilets and baths and that kind of thing. Very 50s and 60s, like I said. And on the coffee table we're adding the remote. I think I added a couple of remote controls for the TV just because I thought maybe one is like the one that's got the large buttons so that you can see it for elderly people or for people who can't see very well. Yeah, so little things like that, little details that I add, you'll see more in the screenshots as well because I'm kind of whizzing through it here. And yeah, it was kind of a challenge to fill up a lot of the wall space, to be honest, because I wanted to vary the items a lot, but I do end up using a lot of the same. I just had to kind of space out where I'd put them. And I also thought this table strangely reminded me of something that you would see in a grandparent's house, because it's one of those like folding tables or extending tables that you don't really see anymore. People don't really use these much. And I thought maybe it just looked really cute. And the whole sideboard thing isn't really done much now either. And it has the old gramophone on it as well. So I just thought that was another cute thing, that just to fill up the corridor space a bit. But we've moved upstairs now to the grandma's room. As you can see, it's very pink and frilly. There's a bit of green to kind of dilute the pink a little bit. And she's got her old vanity here with some of her very old looking perfumes on, and maybe some like proper vintage pieces. I actually have a few items of my grandma's makeup that's probably about 30 years old. Like a mirror compact that still has powder in it, and some old lipsticks. And I know it might be quite gross, but also it's just so sentimental to me. Obviously I don't use the makeup, but I love how I just love how well it's been preserved. Like it's just nowadays if you drop like a MAC blush, it's just gonna smash everywhere and it's not gonna last 5 minutes. So I just love that element as well, that they don't make them like they used to. And it's so true, because the amount of things that are still around from that sort of generation, that's not going to happen with our items for sure. Like just things aren't made to last like they used to be. And I get why that's so like appealing to that generation, and I get that. As much as it's nice to have new things, I think it's also really special when you hold on to them and pass them down to family members as heirlooms. I just like that. It's really cute. And I think the older I get, the more I appreciate that, and the more I think about the things that I'd pass to my grandchildren. I know that's really like, it's a long way off, but I like that element of life, and the fact that you can pass things down and they'll remember you through that. This is getting really deep for a voiceover, you guys. So anyway, this is the grandkids room. I definitely had to have one of the beds with the cat bedding, and there's a lot of little cat decals all over the room. And this really old doll's house that I thought was maybe, again, like a vintage piece. And when I was a kid, I used to love doll houses. I remember, I think my grandpa either built me one or like bought a messed up one and fixed it all up for me. And I loved it so much. And it was the kind of thing that if someone in your circle of friends had one, then everybody was jealous. And yeah, I love my doll's house. So I put that there as like an old piece, and it's specifically meant to be an old one. And yeah, now the grandkids play with it. So that's great. It's, life goes on. It gets used again and loved again. So yeah, the room's kind of a cluttery mess, but I love it. And I think the grandkids would too. And the garden's also really nice for them as well. There's lots of flowers and space to run around. But it's also quite a safe area as well. So for the front, I wanted to add like some lavender and some flower beds just around the porch, and I've had to like lower the foundation to add these, because you know how annoying it is trying to add them when the foundation's up. They just snap to the higher level. So yeah, I've added these flowers. Maybe the grandma takes care of these specifically out the front just for presentation, and then around the back is a little bit more of a wild garden, where the laundry is as well, like the washing line, and the little pond area for wildlife. And yeah, she just takes pleasure in kind of watching the wildlife, and yeah, just all that good stuff, enjoying life. So at first I thought I could use a debug pond, but even the small ones were huge, so I ended up just making my own. I just used a fountain just for safety reasons. Plus I don't want my Sims just randomly like jumping into a pool that isn't a pool or isn't meant to be a pool. So yeah, I used a fountain instead, so it's just quite shallow, and I just add some reeds and some grass and some algae and stones all around, and it's just really, really natural. It's just been left to really do what it wants, and there's a couple of like little gnomes and flamingos dotted around, just really cutesy items, and it's kind of just been left to do its thing. And I also later on add the coffee table we got with my first pets. Well, I discovered it's the one that has the fish in, by the way, I didn't say that. If you size it down, the fish stay where they are, and they kind of look like they're swimming. Yeah, so they're kind of floating on the top a little bit, but if you don't mind that, they kind of look, I don't know, they look like they're populating the pond, and I like that. It just gave a bit of life. And also here was just another new idea I had, was just to make a little garden swing. Again, something my grandparents had in their garden for years, and I love that. So I just used these random items and just sort of sized it up or moved it up, and the Sims can actually use it. So I really hope you enjoyed the build, guys. Thank you so much for joining me, and you can download it on my gallery if you liked it. Thanks so much. Bye.